In the 1930s, the infamous Dust Bowl occurred. The Dust Bowl is the name of a severe drought that took place in United States history. And various things contributed to why this happened. One of the main things was there was a severe lack of rain. And according to the encyclopedia, this drought lasted for 6 years. And even after it was over, it took some time for us to recover from that. Again, this happened from the year 1930 to 1936. This picture, if you can't tell, that's the top of an old truck. It's buried in all that dust. And you can see some of the wagon wheels and farm equipment right there. These dust storms were quite severe. From the little I read about this, there were times that these storms were so bad they would black out the sun in the middle of the day. It was a pretty serious time in our history, especially for food and our agriculture. If you have a Bible, open it with me to the book of Genesis. We'll be reading from Genesis this morning. Genesis chapter 41. According to the book of Genesis, Joseph predicted that there'd be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of drought. And I mention this because extended periods of drought are quite common, even in modern history. We don't even have to go back to the 1930s. Even in recent times in our country, there's been times of drought. Well, through the providence of God, Joseph was able to tell Pharaoh about the coming famine. And the record of the Bible says the Pharaoh believed him, and the Pharaoh appointed Joseph as the governor of Egypt. And so with his new position of authority, Joseph stored grain during the 7 years of plenty, and that prepared them for the 7 years of drought. Chapter 41, go to verse 53. Genesis 41, verse 53. And the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt were ended. And the 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said. And the dearth was in all the lands. But in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph, what he saith to you do. And the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. And all the countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because the famine was sore in all the lands. Well, these verses here set the stage for the context we'll be looking at this morning. From time to time, I've been preaching from the book of Genesis, just hitting the highlights of this book. So this morning, we're going to look at chapters 42 and 43. And these passages teach us about the kind of person Joseph was, even though he went through a lot of difficulties in his life. He was a man who was willing to forgive. And this passage also teaches us about God and God's faithfulness. And so we're going to continue in chapter 42. Again, if you have your Bible, I encourage you to open it to the book of Genesis. And we'll continue with chapter 42, verse 1. Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do you look one upon another? And he said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, Lest peradventure mischief befall him. So they're running out of food. Right? It's a famine. It's a drought. They're running out of food. And so Jacob learns that there's corn or grain in Egypt. And so he says to his sons, go buy us some food. And they obeyed. They made the trip. Now Benjamin was his youngest. And Benjamin stayed home with Jacob. And so his sons obeyed. They went to go buy corn. And while they were there, Joseph, again, and he's now the governor of Egypt. It's been a long time since his brothers had seen him, about 20 years. They don't recognize Joseph. Joseph was probably wearing Egyptian clothing and looked like an Egyptian. They didn't recognize him, but he recognized them. He saw them and knew who they were. Let's go down to verse 7. Chapter 42, verse 7. It says, Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, and they knew him not. So again, the text says here, he made himself strange unto them, meaning he acted like a foreigner. Again, at this time, he would have looked like Egyptian. He spoke the Egyptian language. Later on, if you read this story, it talks about he used an interpreter to talk. So he's not speaking in the Hebrew language, their language. He's speaking Egyptian and using an interpreter. So he concealed his identity. They didn't recognize him, but he recognized them. And he used his anonymity to test them. Right? And so he knows a lot of things about them that, again, they're not aware of. Right? He knows who they are. He knows who their father is, and he knows where they come from. But he begins to question them and test them. And Joseph here accuses them of being spies, which is quite a serious accusation, especially during a time when there's scarcity. You can imagine one nation or one group of people maybe going to Egypt to try and fight to steal a bunch of food. So accusing them of being spies is quite a serious allegation. They denied it and told Joseph many details about their family. They told him about Benjamin, how they had a brother back home with their father, Benjamin. And notice what it says, verse 15. Let's go down to verse 15 and 16. And these are Joseph's words to his brothers. Verse 15, he says, Hereby ye shall be proved or tested. He says, By the life of Pharaoh ye shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. Send one of you, and let him fetch your brother, and ye shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you. Or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely ye are spies. Right? So he put them in prison 3 days, and after those 3 days, he did change the arrangement slightly. He didn't just send one of them back. He chose to send all of them except one. He kept Simeon, one of his brothers. He kept Simeon as a prisoner, and he released the others to go back to Canaan, and he instructed them, you go back, get your younger brother, Benjamin, and you bring him here to Egypt. And I'll know you're not spies then, because you've shown me the truth. You told me the truth. Well, they returned to their father Jacob, and they explained everything that happened, and Jacob did not like what they said. He did not like what he was hearing. Go to verse 36. Verse 36. And Jacob their father said unto them, Me have ye bereaved of my children. He says Joseph is not. He still thinks Joseph is dead. Right? If you remember, they faked his death. So he thinks Joseph is dead. He says Simeon is not. Simeon was kept as a prisoner by Joseph, ironically. And then he says, and you will take Benjamin away? All these things are against me. Right? He felt like he was losing his family. Right? He mentions these 3 sons and how he thinks Joseph's dead and he thinks these other 2 are in danger. He felt like everything was against him. Well, if you keep reading, Reuben promised that he'd take Benjamin to Egypt safely and bring him back safely. But Jacob refused. If you go down to verse 38, chapter 42, verse 38, and he said, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in the which ye go, then shall ye bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. So he thinks Joseph has passed away, and if he lost Benjamin too, that'd be too much for him. And so he says, you're not taking Benjamin. Right? It's not going to happen. So, their hands are tied, and his other son's still a prisoner. Right? Simeon's still a prisoner back in Egypt. Well, again, this was a time of famine, and their options they don't have a million options, right? One quick lesson, we'll move on to chapter 43. Sin can lead to a guilty conscience. When these brothers, when they went to Egypt to buy grain, again, Joseph knows who they are, and he's testing them. Maybe he's getting a little revenge. It's not quite severe, not what they did to him for sure. But he speaks roughly with them. He puts them in prison a few days. He lets them go. And he has a plan here if you read the whole story. So maybe he's getting them back just a little bit. They kind of deserved it. But when they go to Egypt and he accuses them of being spies, notice immediately what they start to say and how they respond. Go back to verse 21. Chapter 42, verse 21. They said one to another, "We are verily guilty concerning our brother, and that we saw the anguish of his soul, when he besought us and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us." They're talking here about what they did to Joseph. The irony is, Joseph is standing there listening to them. While they're sitting there like, man, we're getting in trouble because of what we did. So they had a guilty conscience. And again, what they did, that happened about 20 years ago. So again, think about this. This horrible thing they did to their brother. Again, they faked his death, sold him in slavery. They'd been thinking about that for 20 years. For 20 years, that haunted them. Not only does the Bible teach us about God's forgiveness, but it also encourages us to forgive one another, to forgive our brothers and sisters, to forgive our friends and people in general. And we won't have time to read it this morning, but later on in this story, Joseph does reveal himself. He tells them that he's their brother Joseph. And Joseph forgave his brothers for what they did. And it really is an amazing thing. And again, Lord willing, we'll look at that in a future sermon. But it's worth noting, he did not have to do that. As far as his position of authority, he had the most authority in Egypt. He was only second to the Pharaoh. And as we've already seen in this passage, he could have locked them up in prison and just thrown away the key. Right? Really given them a taste of their own medicine. He could have sold them off as slaves if that's what he wanted to do. Again, giving them a taste of their own medicine. But he chose forgiveness. And there's a powerful lesson in that. God urges us to receive his forgiveness and to forgive others. And this is, I think, one of the more significant lessons that we can learn from this passage. Again, Joseph was a man who forgave. Even, again, forgave those who wronged him severely. Let's go to chapter 43. And again, this whole story also focuses on the faithfulness of God. And by faithfulness, I mean God's trustworthiness. God keeps his word. God keeps his promises. And you can see that in this that's a recurring theme in this whole account. So we go to chapter 43. Again, the brothers had returned to Canaan. They returned to Jacob. Tell him everything that happened. Jacob's not happy. He says, well, you're not taking Benjamin. Well, again, there's a famine. They're running out of food. Chapter 43, verse 1, it says, the famine was sore in the land. And it came to pass when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said unto them, go again, buy us a little food. And Judah said unto him, the man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. All right, so Jacob tells him to go buy more food. And Judah, again, one of his sons, reminds him, well, that's not the deal. We can't just go back. The man said, you can't come back unless you bring Benjamin. They couldn't get Simeon back unless they brought Benjamin. So Judah reminded him of this situation of the deal that this Egyptian man made with them. If we go to verse 6, chapter 43, verse 6, Israel said, "Wherefore, why, dealt ye so ill with me, as to tell the man whether ye had yet a brother?" Right? It's kind of a funny comment, you know. Jacob is saying, why'd you tell him so much? Why'd you tell me you have a brother back home? Like, why you tell him all our business? Right? There's a lesson in itself. Sometimes it's wise not to talk too much. Right? But again, they have no options. You know, either they returned to Egypt and got more food, or they'd starve to death. So Jacob yielded. He told them to go back and let Benjamin, the youngest, go with them. And so they went back to buy more food, buy more grain. And Joseph saw them again. He immediately recognized them. And Joseph told one of his servants to summon them to his home, the home of Joseph. And this worried the brothers. Go down to verse 18. Chapter 43, verse 18, it says, "The men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, because of the money that was returned in our sacks, at the first time are we brought in, that he may seek occasion against us and fall upon us and take us for bondmen and our asses." All right, so they were worried that he's going to ambush them and take them as slaves and their livestock as well. And it mentions some money. We're only hitting the highlights. When they left Egypt, they realized someone put all their money back in their bag. So now they're really stressing out because if someone was aware of that, it looks like they stole the food. And so he says, he's going to make us a slave. Right? So they start talking to the servants in Joseph's home, and one of the servants assured them that wouldn't happen, that they were there as guests. And eventually Joseph arrives, and he spoke to them. And they still don't know it's Joseph. So he's asking them basically about his own family, but there again, they don't know that. He's accused them of being spies, and they think it's like an interrogation. Chapter 43, look at verse 27. It says, "He asked them of their welfare, and said, Is your father well, the old man of whom you spake? Is he yet alive? And they answered, Thy servant our father is in good health. He is yet alive." Now I want you to notice verse 28. It says, "They bowed down their heads and made obeisance." All right, that's not a very common word. It means they prostrated them. So they're really bowing low to him. In verse 29, it says, "He lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, Is this your younger brother of whom ye spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son." So again, there's lots of lessons we could consider. For time's sake, I just have one more I'd like to share with you. And it's, again, God keeps His promises. God is faithful. God is trustworthy. But we should know when God keeps His promises, He may not fulfill them in a way that we expect Him to. You know, when Joseph was young and still living at home with his family, he had dreams, right? It's one of the more, I think, iconic parts of his story. You know, he's this dreamer, and he had these dreams. And even when he was in prison, he's able to interpret dreams. It's a big part of his story. Go back to chapter 37. So again, this is when he was still living at home with his family. Chapter 37. He dreamed on more than one occasion. He dreamed that his family would bow down and worship him or make obeisance to him. It's an act of submission, this bowing down. Chapter 37, go to verse 9. Genesis 37, verse 9. It says, "He dreamed yet another dream, and told his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars," he had 11 brothers, "sun and the moon, 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying." So it's interesting. Jacob rebukes him. "What's this silly dream you're having? You really think we're coming bow down to you?" But then it says he observed the saying, or he kept it in mind. So he didn't forget what Joseph was saying. Well, if we go back to chapter 43, the passage that we just looked at, if you look at verse 28, again, they've been summoned to his house in Egypt. And again, the middle of verse 28 says, they bowed down their heads and made obeisance. All right, this is a partial fulfillment of this dream he had all those years ago. But think about everything Joseph went through before this happened. Again, that dream was, from what we're reading here in chapter 43, that was about 20 years in his past. And his brothers faked his death. They sold him into slavery. When he was enslaved and in prison for approximately 13 years. And I don't know how you divide those. But you can know about 13 years he served as a slave and then he was a prisoner. And so when he was a slave, eventually, he's put in prison on false charges. And then after all those things, we come to the text we're reading, where he has all his brothers, even his youngest brother, the brother he's very fond of, and you see them bowing down to him. A person shouldn't allow his preconceived ideas about God and how he thinks God might do certain things in his life. A person should not allow those preconceived ideas to lead him astray from faith in God. And quite a few people have this strange idea that if they believe in God, nothing bad will ever happen to them. That everything in life will just be wonderful. Now, we can't think about blessings God gives us. That is part of what the Bible teaches. But this idea that if you believe in God, nothing bad will ever happen, that's not a biblical idea at all. And it's very important that we touch upon this, especially for young people, I think also for new converts, because people, and I don't know where this idea comes from, it's not biblical at all, but people get this idea that I believe in God, I will never suffer. Nothing bad will ever come my way. And then what happens? Something bad happens, right? Someone passes away. Someone gets sick. Financial problem, whatever. And people, well, God must not be real. God must not love me. And I've literally known people who've lost their faith because they've bought into this idea. Well, again, that idea doesn't come from the Bible. Joseph went through painful experiences, even though he was a man of integrity. He was a man who honored God. Again, the Bible teaches faith gets you through the storms of life. It doesn't make the storms just completely disappear. There's a big difference between those two things. Again, faith gets you through the storm. It doesn't make the storm disappear. So we look at this biblical account. God kept the promise that he made to Joseph. And you keep on reading, his family did bow down to the earth to him. But Joseph experienced betrayal and pain before those dreams were fulfilled. And this is a reminder, excuse me, this is a reminder that life can be hard. Life can be trying. And when we face trials, may we have steadfastness like Joseph. So this morning we've considered just a few things from the life of Joseph. Again, he was wronged, but he was a man of forgiveness. He suffered, and yet the Bible teaches he was guided by the unseen hand of God. God offers forgiveness to everyone. And the Bible teaches that if we are merciful, we shall obtain mercy. Perhaps there's something difficult you are facing in your life. And again, I think it's bound to happen. Anyone who lives long enough, we're all going to have trials. We're all going to face difficulties. And the Bible teaches, God has not forgotten you. Just because you're going through something difficult, God has not turned his back on you. He is faithful. He sees your pain. He sees your difficulties, just as he saw the difficulties of Joseph and countless others. May we have faith to weather the storms of life. And it's through suffering that our faith is strengthened and we gain the experience that is necessary, the experience we need that we can help others and be there for others when they go through difficulties. Joseph is one example of this, and Christ is the ultimate example. And I'll leave you this morning with this one verse from the New Testament. 2 Corinthians 8, verse 9, it says, "Ye know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, that ye through his poverty might be rich." Right? Christ willingly suffered to help you, to help us, to make us rich. And may we find comfort and encouragement in that when we go through difficulties. If there's anyone here who's not yet a follower of Christ, again, the Bible teaches He came to this world to give you spiritual blessings, to make you wealthy in the sight of God, to offer you forgiveness and a home in heaven. And the invitation to believe in Him and put Him on in baptism, that is extended at this time. If there's anyone who's not yet done that, there's no better time than the present to, again, obey His words and become a follower of Christ today. And if we could aid you in doing that, if we could offer prayers or encouragement for anybody, please let us know by coming forward as we stand and as we sing.